just like in our fashion, David, we're right into things, so we'll just keep going. But thank you and very much for joining us. So welcome to Supporters Fund Ask an Angel, and today we're really excited that we get to dive into everything that you're doing in Los Angeles, David. So maybe the best way to start is if you can give us a bit of a background idea on kind of where you've come from, the things that you're currently working on, and then one thing about you that nobody would know.
Yeah, cool. I'll do like a quick 2-minute. Started my career at Microsoft. Came to LA to go the engineering route and worked for a couple startups that exited, and eventually found myself at Red Bull in a senior engineering role. Held a senior title for about 3 years, and after 3 years, launched my corporate innovation studio called AugX. And from there, made a couple angel investments. And in 2020, I attended Adventure University to kind of fulfill a little bit more of my investing capability, because I think it's just like anyone else that's just jumping into angel investing, didn't really know exactly what they were doing right off the bat, but had a lot of network, had a lot of friends that are founders. So it was easy to learn from them. And then Venture University kind of took that to the next level. And they also helped me to launch Action Ventures. So Action Ventures is a boutique syndicate made up of LPs, mixed of family offices and other business owners. We invest in high performance ventures, we like to say. High performance just means something of an incredible unfair advantage. Very, very, it could be a really strong engineering team. It could be a really strong financial engineering perspective. So we're just kind of looking for unfair advantages in that sense, and that's what we consider high performance. And then we write check sizes in the size of 25 to 50K through a syndicate. And then all throughout kind of this angel investing thing, I've been writing a bunch of small checks. So that's actually been pretty fun as well. So it's we can get into that, but yeah, definitely.
I love it. Well, I kind of want to, and one thing about you before we jump, I always almost forget this, but one thing about you nobody will know.
Nothing really out there that says it, but I grew up in a small village in Alaska called Barrow, Alaska. They recently changed the name back to a First Peoples name called Utqiagvik. But yeah, I grew up in a small Alaskan town.
That's amazing. That's very cool. So you're almost Canadian then.
Almost. I mean, there's definitely some First Peoples culturals that I really took in. I can Eskimo dance, so
I like it. We're gonna call you Canadian anyway. So for all the listeners out there, meet David. He's Canadian and he's grown up in the snow. So we're welcoming you in. That's amazing. That's pretty cool. Thanks, I still think Alaska should be totally 100% part of the Canadian side of everything, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm going to go with it anyways.
I know that would be an interesting kind of like history analysis to look at, but yeah, it's interesting. Oh, by the way, Alaska does have one of the most active, LP endowments. It as a sovereign nation and such. So pretty interesting. I'd love to see their VC performance, but they're pretty active.
Oh yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I'm going to guess that during the winter months, which are longer, they may have some time on their hands, and they're probably looking at maybe getting into ventures. So I can see a big opportunity there. I think I'm going to have to start finding some people there. Well, some people in. Let's work together on this one. I love it.
Cool.
Very good. Very good. So I kind of want to go back to some of the past and some of the things that you did throughout the Red Bull and the Microsoft days. How much of that do you think is really built into what you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I came to Microsoft as an analyst. I thought that I was going to go the business route, when in fact, a couple of mentors at Microsoft kind of deterred me and said, it kind of convinced me to go toward the engineering route. I actually loved the immediate, incentive. So when you launch something, you release something, you write a little bit of code, you kind of get that like quick hit of feedback if you ship it. And so learning how to code was a really interesting thing while working a full-time job. but we did it. And then also at Microsoft, with my entrepreneur mindset, I always knew that I wanted to build something, but in Microsoft, we built, I put on the entrepreneur hat, and we built tools that helped us, transfer data to sales teams and back, so and so forth. The team that I was on specifically, it was called the traffic quality team, and it was click advertising at its like peak. Bing had just acquired the Yahoo click feed. We were at this like peak moment where they're getting so much data, just tons of data on the platform. And in the process, we had to figure out, algorithms and things that were happening that prevented huge fraudulent activity. And so in order to do that, we had to come up with tools and processes internally. And that's what really got me excited. Fast forward, a lot of that work that was done for click forensics and such was somewhat rewarded because the digital crimes unit at Microsoft was able to solve a big, I think, $90 million or so case. And that was a lot of the work and analytics that we did. Came to LA because I also found that it was peak Windows Phone, it was peak iPhone. So I realized that, I could either create a career or build technologies that were, simple, fast, and easy to get out there. And it was amazing. It was easy to do, kind of as a first stepping stone. And then you start to get into the full stack, and you start to get into data. And so the startup that I came to LA for was it was an inventory management product, and built everything top to bottom. Me and another engineer, and then we shipped it. And 18 months later, they were acquired. Moved into another type of aspect, which was streaming. So streaming is what got me into Red Bull. We kind of did a lot of digital streaming, and at the time, it hadn't been figured out yet. Like holding data and holding content on a phone was whether you encrypted it on the phone and like prevented people from stealing the movie, for example. Those were little things that we had to figure out. And then I think after that, it was just mostly distributed and mobile. So like, how else could you figure out, putting out I think the last thing actually I worked on code-wise was a React Native, application that was distributing content, 4K content. So it was pretty interesting. And then that leads to my investing, kind of thesis, which is I can take apart consumer internet products. I can take apart distributed cloud products and anything that has to do with mobile and experiences. So that leads to marketplaces, apps and like technology stack development, where you're looking at edge products, IoT. I think that I'm actually really excited. One of the companies I invested in is called Macrometa. So, one of my fourth or fifth markups right now. Really excited about that. But it's edge software, so I was able to understand the problem that they're trying to solve at the enterprise level as well. So to shorten that up, it does give the engineering side does definitely give you a lens into what might be coming in terms of technology, and as innovation just kind of keeps going like at a ridiculous rate, I'm really excited for the kids that are entering engineering right now, what they're going to come up with, what they're going to identify as opportunities. So it might be way far from where I ended from my engineering career, and that's kind of exciting for me. So I don't actually have to be an engineer to understand it anymore. I think things are way farther now than where I ended, to be honest, as well. So.
And you still dive into the code side. So when you're looking at these companies and you're potentially going to make an investment, do you go into the code? Do you ask for that aspect of it and say, hey, you know what, I can do all this, or you're just envisioning based on where they're going and just using that as your kind of ground level to get everybody else interested from an investment side?
That's a good point. I think the way I look at a business in total is, kind of the business. And so if it is based on an engineering problem, then yeah, I'll definitely dig into the stack and have more of an engineering conversation. But then I think the reality is what we're seeing is companies can get to parity very, very quickly without having to do a huge engineering campaign right away. And so I think when you and I connected, as professional service providers in this world, you can do so much now with no code and low code tools to get your business up to parity, and that includes like internal things like how are you handling your accounts receivable? How are you handling your tax and performance? All these tools you can do without having to create anything from scratch. Customer acquisition tools, and so the challenge that I see is if you're going to a deeper kind of engineering route and you're really trying to figure out a big engineering problem, that's super attractive. But if you're attempting to do something in, for example, consumer, a lot of the problems have been figured out. So what I'm looking for in terms of that is how fast you can move along your stack. How quickly can you get to parity using off-the-shelf tools, off-the-shelf code, off-the-shelf stacks, just move quickly. So there's two categories I'm looking at there.
Well, that's amazing. And it's kind of cool that you get the opportunity to actually understand the code, jump in, decide if this is hack or this is good. And then from there, you can also envision where something's going to go. So you're actually tying in other investors into that mainstream idea that, this is where things are today, but I can totally envision that this can get to this extra stage with some engineering and the capabilities. So I guess that kind of goes into your investment thesis, which is really based around, what is that hidden gem that they've got built into their company? And can it be engineer based? Can it be product based? Whatever that might be. And this is where it's going to end up. So you have to really be able to foresee that future, which I think brings a really good element to any investment group, because sometimes we can't see far enough out. So we can't see that this could be successful and that it's just going to end up being a big cost squeeze and end up failing. So you've probably got a good vision in that because you can understand code.
Yeah, I think it helps. And I think very rarely, though, do I jump in unless I get true access. And, it is interesting, though, because right now at this very moment, I will say that a lot of companies I've looked at have raised, not that I've invested in, but there's a lot of companies that have raised at incredibly high valuations and they have zero tech whatsoever. It's like they have processes and they have things in place, but they have zero tech, like zero tech stack, which is really interesting. So,
and how do you guys evaluate a type of company like that? And I've gone through some of the investments you guys have made. From one of them that sound pretty interested, which was Trash Warrior.
Yeah.
These are probably not heavily code based. They're more services / code. You're still doing something, but it's allocating maybe a vehicle or anything else that's going to kind of help you move and get things out of a space. But what makes you decide to go into that versus diving into a super heavy code based investment?
Yeah, I would love to explain a little bit about Lily, and it's a good time to kind of like uplift the company. But Trash Warrior, surprisingly, they actually had a really, really sophisticated back end, and they lifted that up by having a really, really easy and simple front-facing product. And to kind of harp on Lily's personal experience, she had a lot of product experience as well as data science experience. And she was partly responsible for bringing Niantic's curve the other way around. So they had a drop curve in their growth, and she turned that growth around from her data science experience. And so I think the way that she was approaching this whole thing from the beginning was a marketplace with a really strong data science perspective and lens, and then the ability to move very, very, very quickly on the engineering side. So they kind of hid the fact that it was very complex, and your customer experience was just a 3-step experience. That's all it was. You put in your name, you put in your information, and you hit send. And they made it so simple that now they're at 6 million GMV, and they just started there. So they just started their kind of like rise. So it was very impressive that they were able to do that. And without me actually having to jump into the code, I could definitely tell that there was a lot of complexity behind the scenes. And that's what gave me a lot of the conviction there too. It's like they did it. They figured that out.
No, that's pretty cool. So now kind of taking this, the investment side of and how you guys are going after different spaces, can you give us an idea of where you fit in with making that investment? Are you guys just money in and keep working? Do you work with them after? Do you just go on to the next deal? How do you kind of structure that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny that, the deals that you really want to get in, they almost don't need you. And so they don't need you very much. So with the smaller checks, we like to do the capital, but we try to bring in some value add right away. So if it's a matter of, finding human resources or, bringing in some human capital, if there's any way that we could, use our network of builders to help build or getting in the engineering side, we do. I think one company that I'd like to talk about in particular is BO, or stands for back of house. I knew that there was a really strong, force behind the founder, but I just had to match him up with a CTO because his prior technical co-founder had left. And so just jumping in and bringing in and getting him in front of technical people to see if they had a fit in a very, very short amount of time. That's where we kind of come in. We'll get on the phones, we'll roll our sleeves up, we'll do a bunch of tactical work with you. So it helps.
And are there a couple of things that you look at when now talking with these different founder groups where you feel you fit best, like things that you can actually tackle for them?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is as much as this information is out there in terms of raising money, you realize that a lot of founders, I guess, don't have a process in place for raising money or raising capital. And that process needs to be somewhat of a sales engineered process. So that is something I jump in with immediately. It's like, all right, let's get your narrative down. Let's get your sales, your investor funnel kind of set up, and we'll start doing the introduction. We'll do the roadshow. I feel like sometimes that's new information for some people, but it's like once you have a solid process and more meetings you could do, the better. The more relationships you could build early, the better. And so that's one thing we help them with prior to even getting in with anything else. So the ones that actually raise very well and very quickly, I think that's where we kind of have a challenge to bring in additional value. So, again, tactical work, strategic work, connections to more engineers. Like any computer vision type of, ideas, I direct them immediately to opencv.ai. And that, Dr. Malik is a great, founder himself, but he basically manages the code for OpenCV. And so coming up with processes, connecting the dots like immediately, like on the spot, without second guesses, without question, helps that early founder go in. Oh, also in terms of stage, because I think to clarify on the stage, it's pre-seed. So we're dealing with a lot of early stuff, pre-rev, pre-product, just ideas. And so we like to kind of set those up and tee it up for other investors too. So I think that's the other thing is we kind of add that extrinsic value to make sure that company has some clarity with other investors.
We're bringing in a lot of that early push. So they kind of need a little bit of everything. So you really do have to wear this tool belt that is very open-ended. That can really be the Swiss Army knife of everything, because being in that pre-revenue, pre-anything, the ideation is that you're almost a mini accelerator for finding these obscure businesses that you can take, build up, get them some traction, and then throw them out to market and start finding investor relations and people that will want to invest in it. But if you're finding ones like we talked about that aren't on the same path as everybody else, you kind of have to be creative in a way to get them funded or get them moving forward in that funnel, because they are going to be a little bit different, off the beaten path, and you're trying to find what makes them exceptional, right?
Yeah, and you kind of said it right there. It's it's definitely that exceptional thing, because we already know that in that stage, there's a lot of missing parts. So we're just looking for really unique, unfair competitive advantages. And so, and that could be completely, subjective, but it's how we build that fit with that founder really early. And you're right, like there's a ton of gaps in the beginning, but I think it's pretty fun to fill those things in the beginning as well.
So how important are, I guess, the main little fundamentals like sales or governance or maybe inventory management based on the type of customer? What kind of things do you guys have to really hone in on to make sure that you can move them to that seed round investing? Like, what things are really important to you guys? Is it just get everything organized, start building your company, get your product done? Or is it sell? Like, what kind of things do you have to focus on in this really early stage of helping a company work their way up?
I think it's different in each case. And, we approach everything kind of individually. So each deal is different. But where the founder comes in, with certain aspects of the company, we like to, or at least I like to evaluate like what I could do immediately today that makes them look better for the next fundraise. So that's kind of the milestone. It's like, what are these things you could do today that can help them prepare for the next fundraise coming up? And so a lot of times that's actually the team, and I don't know what people's personal thoughts are on, solo founders these days, because it's actually going to change quite a bit for solo founders. But for me, it starts with a team. Then it starts with kind of like finding where the connective tissue is with that founder. So if there is sales, if they already have sales as their prior career down, it doesn't make any sense for me to bring in advisors for their sales teams. But if they are for example, if they're an enterprise solution and they don't have a great sales engineering team down, I teach them about pipeline. Like, what does that pipeline look like? How can we get $1 million pipeline established before your next raise? It doesn't have to be closed. It just needs to be, optically good and get your 10 logos in there at least to kind of get your pipeline. And so these concepts are like, these are things that we've all covered in Venture University, and I kind of borrow a lot of that. But I think where I really hone in on my conviction is like, how much connective tissue do I have with that founder? And are they coachable? Are they able to accept what I'm bringing to the table? And if we have a good fit, then it kind of keeps going from there. I don't really have that operationalized by any means, but that's why it takes kind of these one-off, long relationship building processes.
I love that. And because you're in so early, there is a real coach / mentorship buildup here that's going on, because you're going in and I feel the same way because we're working the same space. We're early stage pre-seed companies, that when you're working with the founders and the founding teams, that they are leaning on you for a lot more things in this early stage. Unless, like you said, they're getting money thrown at them everywhere, then you kind of feel like an outsider just waving some money and trying to throw it in, but you're really not part of the mix. So it's kind of a pullback. It's almost not as exciting because you're like, I'm just throwing money in and, because you look like you're going to do well, but it doesn't carry the same weight. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on, you mentioned the co-founder and single founder side, and we're going to touch on that in a second, but I'm more interested on this part of how valuable does the accelerator or the incubator side, that you've kind of are doing this without calling it that, but that you're accelerating these businesses, and what you're getting out of this is you're building this real strong relationship with the founder, guiding them through. How valuable do you think that piece of it really is compared to how other VC groups are really handling startups, especially as they start moving through? It just becomes about money, and value later on, but they don't really have that early on what they had, which was that connection with investors, that connection with guiding and making choices and direction. So how valuable do you think that this piece is that you're doing right now compared to that all the way up to a Series D and E and going public, how valuable do you think this part is in the ecosystem for startups?
I think from the founder's perspective, it's extremely valuable. The mistake that I kind of make sometimes is that I assume that founders have already watched all the Y School videos, or they have already watched all the, there's a lot of information out there. And I'm like, you kind of don't know that if they, you don't have any reference to if they've already done the baseline work. But what I'm also looking at is, I don't want to have to evangelize that your company needs to be a $1 billion business. Like, I think that you should be able to understand that with inflation and everything, and gas being $10, having $1 million in the bank in the next couple of years is almost going to be the same as having $100,000 in the bank because of inflation. So I think sometimes people are afraid to say that they're going to be a $1 billion company, but not really taking in the fact that with inflation, our $1 billion companies today are going to be multi-trillion-dollar companies. And so we're small fish being billionaires or being $1 billion companies. So first and foremost, they just need to be open to the fact that value creation isn't for them. It's actually a lot broader and a lot more people value a public company if you can create something from scratch. And so they need to be on that trajectory mentally, or at least have a mental, framework to know that that's a trajectory that requires this type of capital. The next thing is, it's not all about the returns, right? So I think in order to think in what we like to say, like a 3D chess perspective, if the founder has at least one or two or three of these concepts and these frameworks in, and we see that there's a gap in their thinking about a go-to-market or a product idea or marketing, that's where I want the founder to understand that it's 80% them, 20% the rest of the team. Like we'll bring in other talent, other things for you to figure out, but it's really your job to keep that to own that vision and arc. And so it's challenging. I mean, that alone, those little things alone are actually quite challenging for a lot of people. And it takes practice, it takes reps of a bunch of different failures, a bunch of different experiences in order to do that. I'd like to, I'm not plugging it in any way, but I just finished Super Founders by Ali Tomaseb. And the book references a lot of statistics on billionaire company or $1 billion companies. And the majority that stuck out, or the little highlight that stuck out to me, was the fact that the founders that built $1 billion companies had already had experience building smaller companies. And so it lends to the fact that might be a great opportunity. So as an early angel investor, the way that I translate that is, okay, if you had some companies prior, that's actually really helpful. But if you show this unique, if you're young and you're 19 and you're showing this really, really unique, perspective that no one else has, I honestly think that you should put a small ticket in there and see if there's some conviction. There could be an opportunity, right? Like you're just buying the opportunity to get into their next business. It might not be that one, but it might be the next one. So well, that's actually a conversation too.
For sure. And if they're a great founder and you really get behind them, even if, the first company may be successful or not successful or whatever you deem as being success, you're buying your way into that person's next steps. So it is something that certainly makes a big difference as an investor because, and I'll give an example. I invested in a company, I think 6 years ago, and they went on and sold their company in November. And the founder came back and said, hey, look, this is where things are at. This is how it's worked out. Super fan of this investor or this founder. And I said, hey, when everything's all said and done, when everything is exited, those dollars are yours for your next company.
Yeah.
And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, because one, I already look at those dollars as being gone, meaning that they were moving through the funnel to wherever they're getting to. But I'm more interested in the next company that you build because it's going to be crushing it. And you don't even know what it is yet. I don't even know what it is yet, but I'm that excited for whatever you decide to do next. So you let me know, and that's what we're going to do. So it fits along that mindset because, like you said, it doesn't matter if it's a unicorn or if it's just $1 billion company, but how someone builds that makes a big difference. It's what the learning they went through, what the struggles they went through that they learned from, that when they go do their next business, it would be quicker, faster, and more efficient. And they're going to be able to find different ways to solve different problems in a better, more conducive way that will save time, effort, and money. And then that means they're going to move quicker into that bigger build of a company, but their energy is still there. Their excitement is still going to be there. And that's what you're in a way paying for, right? You're paying for learning.
And that's our reward too. Is I think the enthusiasm is it's like, you kind of attach yourself to that enthusiasm. It keeps you going as an investor. I think the energy is exactly what you spoke about. And I honestly think that the mental frameworks are there just so you don't get blinded from the enthusiasm.
It's true. I was on a call today, or I was pitching an accelerator. So I was doing a talk. So it's 2 hours. Very long talk, but when I was going through it all, there was a message that came up in chat, and it was of a founder that was going through this accelerator that said, "Hey, I met you 4 years ago, and we talked about this. So great to see you again. And now I'm building my company." So it's a touch point, right? So that person came to an event, we talked, now it came here, and so forth. So those touch points make a big difference in when that founder's going to reach out. And then I'm in my email and I've got someone saying, "Hey, we talked 4 years ago. Here's where my company is. I'm ready for you to come and invest." So you made a little bit of a progress and a difference then. And now today they're coming back looking for more. So there's always a touch point of value that you're going to bring in. Even if you don't invest versus you do invest, you're always going to try and figure out those great founders. I had a call last week, which was interesting. And there was kind of nervous, the founder, you could tell. And then he's like, "So why are you reaching out to me?" And I said, "Because I think you're a rock star and I'm interested in where you're at and what you're doing next and what you're going to be doing today." And he was like, "Oh," and then he just went on and talked about everything. Just like it dropped everything. He opened up and just boom, dropped everything out what he was doing. Right. And that excited me because I think his concern was, maybe I don't even know what the concern was, but the interest was, again, the learning of when I first saw you, the second time I saw you, I got more interested and baked into you as a brand and as a business. So I don't know where you're going to end up today, and it might not be the right investment, but I'll be there again in 6 months or a year. So if you decide to stop this business that I'm not super excited about, and go into the next one, reach out to me. I'll be there even closer because I really like what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I love that. It's a great way to share, a way to tie into a value, and then let that person run with it.
Yeah, I think I don't want to drop too many references, but this could go in the links. I just finished a course from Chris Fralick, who's one of the managing partners for First Round Capital. But there was a program that he put together just really, really quick called Building Relationships. And in the program, he goes into the details, and I'll piggyback on this, but Bouzouki was the founder of Roblox, and it wasn't until year 2 they were able to get a check into the company. So from an initial introduction to around year 2 was when they actually invested. It was just a constant relationship building exercise over that amount of time. And some people aren't patient enough even to consider that that length of time. So I think that's actually a pretty good thing you bring up, because when you're younger, I don't think you actually realize how much, how important it is to kind of keep those relationships and kind of like try really hard to kind of keep those relationships going, and don't shut yourself off from them, because you never know, 4 years later, again, they might be, super valuable, and, you can build together with something that you've established with someone. So I agree in that. I agree with that 100%.
I love it. And I think that touch point is figuring out what that's going to look like, but trying to do something, if it's a reach out in a year, but if you've got some interest in that founder or in that business from an investor standpoint, try to find a way to stay connected, even if it is your own drip campaign that you're doing with other investment emails you're sending out, but doing something just to keep in the purview of what they're doing, and then doing a touch point every once in a while brings a lot of value back to them. And I think I've heard this a million times. Founders feel like they're alone at the top. I don't know why, but they shouldn't if they're that busy driving their business, but maybe they do. And if they do, you know what? It feels good sometimes just to have an outside investor reach out and say hi and just want to learn more and keep that pulse going. So I think there's a lot of value in what you're sharing there. And I think that's brilliant. Let's kind of revert back to that first initial comment that you made about founders and co-founders. I know there's a lot of funds out there in the world that tend to only invest in co-founders, and they can come up with a million reasons why they want co-founders for not having all the smarts of the business in one person, being able to do more with two people. What are your thoughts on the single versus the double? And if it was investing in a single co-founder or single founder, and then versus two co-founders or three, what's kind of that look like for you, and versus one versus the other, and how do you position yourself?
I guess how you diligence it is different than how you kind of perceive it when you first run into them. I think that, I'll say the Trash Warrior, she was a solo founder, but had an amazing engineering team and a team backing her up. Not a problem. No one, really flinched at it at all. And I think it was actually a really cool thing to see her doing. So, I think that as long as it's not a hindrance, as long as you don't present it as a hindrance, I think sometimes founders might self-sabotage themselves by having that chip on their shoulder and saying, "Oh, I don't have a technical co-founder," and it's kind of a droop in their in their talking and in their rhythm and in their energy. Instead, just bring that energy up and say, "Hey, it's really just that energy that you kind of put out when you're presenting the fact that you are a solo founder," and it should be great, because I think right now, with all the tools out there, there's a lot of companies that are trying to reduce that amount of time, that getting to know you phase, and whether they're co-founders or not, getting in front of these people faster should help you build your teams. But going back to the question, it was more so an observation from institutions, because the more that I listen to the industry podcasts and such, the more I realize wow, this is actually pretty new. I didn't realize how new it was in terms of the dynamics. So in addition to being, in addition to diversity entering our industry, it's also the fact that, solo founders is a new concept and they're open to it. So I think it's mostly just an industry observation personally, and the fact that I have, one investment who's also a solo founder and a woman, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I think that we'll definitely run into more as we start to engage this new kind of cohorts of businesses coming in.
For sure, you get a lot of people that tend. I find that from what I've seen is that a lot of non-technical people will find a co-founder so that they can build that strength right away of having that tech resource side versus going in and trying to manage it themselves. And in that case, I find that is a real benefit to helping that company win. I think there's also the other side where they're engineers or they're too technical. They really do need a co-founder on the business side, because they may not be able to speak the acumen or drive that out in the way that maybe most on the business side will. So I think that's also very helpful. It's kind of a rare that you get them in between, but that in between also, it's just, you got to hold more and do more work when you're going in as a single founder. So you really have to have a lot of drive and push and bring in, like you said, a fantastic team to support you. And that's going to really help that move forward. So kudos to you on the investment side and that team and all the other ones. So that's pretty exciting. Well, we kind of taken this real nice little journey here, and got me all excited about this, that whole side of it, the co-investing, the co-founders and the inventors. There's so many good little pieces of insight and information on that, and diving into code and, just fantastic. And I've got one question before we transition here, but on the venture school that you took, how valuable was that for you as being an investor? having the experiences that you've already gone through, how valuable was this just to kind of layer in something new for you, for the investors out there listening?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm a huge advocate for it. So coming from the engineering side, that kind of naturally comes with this individual contributor mindset. And as much as you want to believe you're a great engineer, that doesn't necessarily translate to being a great investor. Of course, you could look at some code. Of course, you could look at a company. But I also find that being a longtime software engineer, the majority of my peers are nihilistic in a way. So as an engineer, you kind of have this kind of like problem to problem approach. You don't really have an opportunity to be super optimistic. And so as an investor, what you have to be is you have to be delusionally optimistic. You have to be somewhat delusionally optimistic. So that kind of goes a little bit against kind of the engineering mindset. So what VU did for me particularly was it gave me the frameworks to think by, not only to evaluate a deal. The technical stuff you pick up very quickly, obviously, as an engineer, but it's the relationships that I realized was like, oh shoot, I've been in an engineering cave for the last 10 years, and I didn't really build that many relationships that would actually grow into things. And so that's why they say investing is a relationship business. And it really is. It's really like how you go about building those relationships early on. And it gives you a lot of context to do that. And then how to approach it, because, no one told me like what a double opt-in was. And so, making introductions to people like, hey, this is a double opt-in. You have to get the opt-in from the recipient, and then also the target introduction. And so really getting into that, there's an art to this. There's really an art to how you engage these relationships. And no one ever wants to get a cold email like, hey, I'm raising money. Check this out. Look at what we're doing. People don't want it to be transactional. And so I would say that definitely helped in that perspective too, is that, you got into a lot of case studies where if you approach a relationship from the do's and don'ts, just pretty much right? Like there's a lot of do's and don'ts in terms of relationship handling and building. So definitely helped there. But the technical stuff, you can get that really easily. Like, what's a 2 and 20, or what's a good deal and what's not a good deal on paper. What does this term sheet look like? Those things are all available, but what's not available on Google or otherwise is like, how do you actually, handle these relationships? And then how do you actually formalize a relationship? And how do you then scale the amount of relationships that you have to go through as an investor? Because part of our job is 98% we say no, and then the 2% we agree to. It's like, how do you manage that, mentally, emotionally, and otherwise? So yeah, I would say that it definitely helped with a lot of that.
I like it. And just to touch on that point of the 2% success rate of investing, like moving forward, the other 98% of having to say no, or when you drop something or let it go through the cracks, or however it's ghosting or whatever they call it these days in relationships. But it is, you're right, there becomes a mental capacity issue on that as well, because you try to appeal and appease as much as you can, but can't do that with everything and everyone. And it does become a bit of a tough go sometimes when you are becoming attached to a business, the founder and what they're doing. I've had a few of those in the past where you're just like, oh my God, I want to invest in this company and I can't figure out how to find the capital to do it. Or what? Oh man, this is choking me. I can't get into this one. It doesn't fit our thesis. Yeah. So there is that. And you're like, well, could I make the exception? And then when you fall out of your exceptions, then you think you didn't do it the right way. You didn't judge it properly. So it becomes tough all around. But I think it's a great learning. And you're right. The whole thing at the end of it all comes down to relationships. Yeah. Every conversation you have, everything you start, everything you finish starts with one relationship, builds on and grows. And I think that makes a big difference in, as you mentioned, the problem solving and being able to be linear or being super communicative, however you phrase that out. But a lot of it comes down to is you and what you need to do in order to get to the next stage and help those with you or the companies you're investing in get to that same stage, be on the same page and grow and move forward. So it's pretty incredible that you've taken a lot of this early stage learning, helped accelerate these companies, dived into the ones that looked exceptional, maybe in the background, but didn't look so great on paper, found the wins, drove it forward, and hopefully all of those keep driving out some great successes.
Yeah. And the ones that you have, the ones that don't have a problem, raising and don't really need you, there's always angel list. That's what I was going to jump into also, which is like, if you're an angel investor and you want to get great deal flow that you might not have seen on your desk, write the small checks. You may run into that company, some way, somehow. And it's like, it's amazing. I guess to throw some optionality in your own personal portfolio. Yeah. You don't always have to. So that's another thing. You don't always have to lead the deal, right? You can get in other people's deals and be a smart investor. So it's interesting. The landscape is amazing right now.
Agreed. It's just like the stock market, right? You can either let things ride and go up and down and one day be a billionaire and the next day be broke, or you can be one that just sells and takes and knows that you can jump on the low wave when it comes back again. So it's interesting, but there's lots of options. You just have to play smart on it.
Yeah.
Well, all that's very valuable. So now we're going to jump into one question that has you sharing a little bit about something that really emphasized, totally just knocks it out of the park for what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So I'm kind of looking for a story that kind of like one of those heartstring pullers, or one of those ones that just really blew your way, that you couldn't believe that this person went from A to B. You didn't think that they had it in them, didn't think they were going to succeed, or you thought they were going to succeed and they didn't. Whatever that is, just looking for, a story that you really see that defines what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Oh man, I think that's an interesting one. So, in the beginning, let me speak a little bit broadly first, and then I'll go into a story that fits, because I think it has a lot to do with me personally. Growing up in a small village in Alaska, I think out of that group, you wouldn't really imagine how many people go off and go graduate college and go pursue other things. But surprisingly, had a lot of classmates that did. I think that there's I think that there's a lot of emphasis on the Valley right now. Silicon Valley is this place, but it's not because everyone's great. I think it's just because the exposure is high, right? So in that place where you can get incredible exposure as a little kid into seeing Steve Jobs' early home, exposure is a big thing. But to me, when my parents came to this country, they were entrepreneurs already. And so the fallback for me and for us was always all right, go create your own thing or go add some value. And the little attachment that I had for investors that are listening to this or in the room is sometimes we get so caught up with how we can add value. I think people try to think of tangible things, when in reality it's kind of self-searching and finding out how you connect with that human at a human level. And anyway, so the entrepreneur journey is that both my parents were entrepreneurs here, and in order for us to exist, they had to become entrepreneurs and build businesses, small businesses that raised us. So our fallback naturally is we go build a business around what you want to learn. And so that's what got me to this point. And I think the challenge that that a lot of people are going to have right now, especially in this current environment, but what's changing is that you're not going to need the Ivy League education any longer to call yourself an entrepreneur. I think that there's so many resources and information out there to identify as an entrepreneur, when even just 10 years ago, if you identified as an entrepreneur, you're just you're looked at a little weird. So today you can identify as an entrepreneur. And I think this kind of trajectory that we all are having if you're a fund manager, you're somewhat of an entrepreneur. If you're in this kind of other environment, any environment, you can be entrepreneurial. And so it's not as looked down upon anymore in a societal sense, I would say. But in order to really get success, I guess that's another story. That's like part 2 of our story. So we will both come back to that. And I think to allude to that, though, this entrepreneurial journey is like filled with discomfort. It's filled with, constantly, preparing. There's a little bit of self-sabotage. And I think the best entrepreneurs actually just, they assume that, they take it, and then they keep going. Like it's just this weird persistence that, I don't know why it hits me every day, but it's like you constantly just have to keep pushing and keep going. So that's kind of the it's not a story arc by any means, but it's something relative that we're all going through right now. And it's something relative that everyone's kind of like wondering about themselves. Am I an entrepreneur? Do I want comfort? Do I want easy? Do I want it easy? Do I want it easier? Or is there a problem that I can solve that's bigger than me? Or do I just need to go and feed my family for the week? It's like there's different contexts of entrepreneurship, and it fits all of those things. It's not just like Bill Gates of the world. Like there's a contextual entrepreneurship that we all kind of have to embrace, especially if we're paying it forward to other entrepreneurs as investors. So I try to identify those connected tissues with my entrepreneurs.
I love it. And I like the fact that you come from a different perspective too, is that your family were entrepreneurs. So you learned right away what that was like, how hard they had to work in order to make things work, what you needed to do. You already had the mindset. You already knew that if I'm going to get into this space, I'm going to have to work hard. I remember teaching a class and I went in and said, hey, how many people here want to be entrepreneurs? And I think one hand was like this. Yeah. And that was it. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Well, when I'm done talking, we're going to ask this question again. And then when I was done the talk, I think there was maybe, 6 hands that went up. Right. And then I went back to the person that was shaking their hand and wasn't sure if they wanted to. And I said, what was the reason why you weren't sure? Oh, I hear all these stories that you got to work 20 hours a day. I don't want to work 20 hours a day. That's crazy. So it was, but maybe if their family had that exposure, they could see that, man, I can get all of this if I work this hard, or I can go this far and do these things if I work this hard. And, maybe that's a short window of 10 years and people think that's a long time. Who knows? But it's interesting that the learning you take from your childhood all the way through your the workspace and all the way through, how that sets a stage for where you are today and where you're going to keep going. But you already know what the measure of risk and work is because you live it. So I think that's pretty cool. And I'll support it with your line. Go start a business on what you want to learn. And I think that's brilliant because I can self-reflect on that and say that I always wanted to build a VC, so I did. Yeah. And I think that you can set goals in your mind and direction you want to take, but if you don't challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone, you won't get there.
Yeah. There was a tweet that I retweeted the other day, but it was saying, getting wealthy isn't about working hard. Because if everyone worked hard, we'd have a lot more billionaires in the world. It's just about leverage at the end of the day. So it's an interesting perspective too. I think we all have a little bit of entrepreneurship in us. We just have to really embrace it and just lean into it. Because I tell you what, sometimes I feel like I've been off the 9-to-5 drug for going on 5 years. And it's like, sometimes I do wish that it's like, oh yeah, I would love to apply for that or get this role or do that. And I realize a lot of VCs do have full-time roles sometimes while doing their funds. But it's also interesting too, when immediately I just kind of switch that off and figure out, okay, I can do this client work right now. I can do this thing. And it really it's like you move past certain things, buy a business, get into certain, we bought and sold a business. And so it's just interesting. It's just interesting. I think we'll jump into that another time. I think that the fallback, again, it's like, okay, cool. Let's go start a business. You and me, Jeffrey, we're going to end up starting another business.
Yep. And it's all timing, it's knowledge, it's direction. It's pretty cool. So I love all the things you shared. We're going to kind of transition now into the rapid fire questions. We'll do these real quick. And then we got a couple questions left. But man, so far amazing, and love the deep dive. It's been great.
Thanks.
All right. Start it off. What's your favorite part of investing?
The relationships, the energy, the enthusiasm, and, turning entrepreneurs every day, like making everyone I know entrepreneurs, making my friends rich.
I love it. I love it. I have to throw this in there, but I used to say I went out, this was 10, 20 years ago. I've been working with startups for so long, and people are like, why are you always pushing this? Yeah. And I said, you know what? I'm like the biggest cheerleader for startups. I don't know why I do it, but I just love the fact that you have to have this drive to get into this space. They're like, yeah, but you're always, I'm like, that's right. Be an entrepreneur. So I love that. Great on you for that. It's beautiful. How many companies do you invest in per year?
I try to do 10 to 12 per year. So last year we did close out with 12. Q1 was a little slow this year, but we're gonna make up for that on some angel list investments, small checks, and then we're gonna try to lead a few more. So I don't have an ego around leading deals. That's another kind of thing to talk about. But yeah, I'm definitely supportive of the ecosystem, and I want to get in as many deals as possible. I think 12 is what we kind of allocate to.
Awesome. Well, you're 3 times the average, so it's brilliant. Any verticals you like to focus on?
I can tell you what I don't focus on. So no bio, no health tech. I just, like if there's a consumer facing health tech component for sure, but I'd leave that to the professionals. I think that there's like a whole world of that I will have to spend another lifetime to learn.
Perfect. Anything that on a due diligence side, either paperwork or team, is there anything that you really emphasize? I know you mentioned team before. So is there anything on that side that you really have to make an investment?
I mean, I think it's about team, optics, and narrative. So shaping your narrative is really important. You're not trying to fool anyone, but you're trying to synthesize it the best way. And telling your story around your team is somewhat challenging because a lot of times people don't like talking about themselves. Especially if you don't have, there's people with chips on their shoulders, and you actually should look into where they have chips on their shoulders. And that's actually, it uncovers a lot about founders, which is actually incredible. So yeah, learn how to shape the narrative. The narrative is very important. And learn how to storytell.
I love it. You mentioned about the lead rounds. You don't have to do that. Do you have any preferred terms? Like, do you like pref shares, safes, anything that you like to stick to when you're making an investment?
No, I mean, as long as the deal terms are right. Like, so pre-seed, I think for a very, very short time in the beginning of this year, we were able to say, great, sub 6 post money, right? Like, we can participate. That's a great deal. Oh, it's a safe, or it's a convertible note. That's fine, great. But I think what we're seeing is a little bit of tiny bit of inflation on the on the valuation side. So we have to dig more deeper into the technology. So if you're going to present, it just kind of as a reaction in this founders market, as a reaction, we have to dig deeper on the technology, on the potential multiples, rather than ownership. So.
Okay. Love it. Do you take board seats, and do you do follow-up investments?
No board seats. And, I wish I could play with pro rata, but, since we're dealing with, uncommitted capital, we prefer not to do the pro ratas.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're good on that. Thank you very much. Couple questions. We're almost there. We're pushing through.
Yeah.
All right. First question. Favorite sports team?
Favorite sports team? Oh man, so I'm into unconventional sports and accident sports. So if you go to my website now, it's like a guy on a motocross bike. But I used to work for Red Bull. So any team in rally and racing, I'm Team Red Bull all the way.
Yeah, Red Bull's pretty exciting. I like their base jumpers and all of the stunts they do high in the sky, which is pretty sick. So.
Yeah.
Big fan of that as well. So very good. Cool. Favorite movie, and which character would you play?
Oh shoot. I think favorite movie was can't remember the name, but Kaiser Sose. Man, I can't remember the name. Just because it's a fast question, but it's where Kaiser Sose. It's with Kaiser Sose. Remind me the name. You know the name, Jeff. Come on.
Oh, it's killing me right now. So
Yeah, Benicio del Toro, Kevin Spacey. I'll have to Google it. Darn it! It is my favorite movie.
The Unusual Suspect.
Unusual Suspects. There you go. Shoot. See, I get stuck on quizzes. Reason I loved it was just the masterful storytelling and the character that I would play. I would probably play the detective, the main detective.
I'm trying to remember what the main detective's name was, but I like that.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to have to watch this movie again. It's been a while.
Oh, second favorite is Moneyball. So it has a lot to do with investing, right? So
yeah,
check that out. Yeah, for sure.
And which character?
I would play Jonah. Like I would be that guy. I would be the data scientist. I mean, I'd be the nerd in that scenario.
It's funny, but yesterday I had a picture of Jonah, and he had this blonde hair slicked back, like I know the guy or something. And I sent it off, and I said he has to have a bigger head than I do. And it was literally yesterday, so I have to share that because big head, small bodies. So I'm like, It has to be true. So
man, I'm a huge head too, man. So I know the feeling.
Yeah, so I thought it was entertaining. But Jonah, if one day when you do listen, don't take it badly. But disproportionate. We all are, but crazy. Anyhow, that was a great movie. I totally agree with that. Okay, last question. What is your superpower?
So to me, superpower is like a recipe of things. I like to motivate people. I can get people stoked. I'm good at energizing and getting people appreciative of ideas. But it can also, scare people away. So I think my thing is translating, all these technical things and making them very approachable and easy to consume, especially in investing. And then the last part of that is, I think that, I think that I can, I don't know, I'm a good connector in a sense. So like I will easily think of 2 or 3 people that I think you should meet when I meet you. And that's immediately what I do. And sometimes it gets a little annoying to people, but it's like I kind of find some of that connective tissue without even having to think about it. And so that's what I do naturally. So I like to kind of lean in on that.
I love it. Well, those are all great characteristics. We shared a ton. As I always say, I don't take notes, but man, I always take notes. I'm around the paper side. So I go in every day thinking I'm not taking notes today. And you know what? I just can't help it. I've got stacks and stacks, but I love it. This is all valuable information. I love the conversation. I think we went into some great spaces. And again, thank you very much, David, today for joining me. We're going to, as we like to do, leave you with the last word. So anything that you want to share to the investor community, to startups, we give you the last word. But again, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing all this great insight. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Jeffrey, for having me. I like to say no cold email. So, feel free to reach out to me, David at action.ventures. Happy to talk about anything, founder, tech startup, investing related, even motorcycles in the car. So happy to do it. I love it. And you got a great URL. It's fantastic. All right. Easy to remember. Well, thank you very much again, David. Give me 1 second. Okay, that was an awesome discussion. Again, so much value in there, man. It's incredible. Loved everything that David kind of went over. I think there's some great pieces around him being a technologist, an engineer, being able to dive into code. I love the discussion around the co-founder versus the single founder, how they've tried both, but there really is a lot of new potential coming into single founder side of things. But being able to solve problems, build relationships, communicate, and I love this line of go start a business on what you want to learn. Incredible. That's just 100% exactly where life should be, is that everything should be about, I want to learn something, I'm going to dive into it, take my background and build something cool. And I'm doing this because I want to learn first and build up everything around it. I love that it's all around technology, motivate and connect. You know, he's got a great skill set, great mindset. It was fantastic talking with you, David. Again, thank you for sharing so much and all about the university and learning about code and venture investing. Incredible, great things. So thank you very much again for your time. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and or in Stitcher. You can also check us out at supportersfund.com, or for startup events, visit opn.ninja. Thank you very much, everybody. Like, feed, share, join. See you guys all next week.